The Trump administration has blocked more than $2 billion in federal money to Harvard University, and this has that once prestigious institution fighting mad. In an exclusive interview with the Chrestman Conversation, the president of Harvard said this, quote, "This is a First Amendment violation. If Harvard wants to discriminate against Asians and Jews, who does Donald Trump think he is to try and stop us? I mean, stopping anti-Semitism is straight out of Hitler's playbook. He's such a fascist, Nazi, end quote. The president then collapsed into a little bitty ball behind his desk and began muttering to himself. And while I'm not sure I understood every word, I'm pretty sure some of those words were the Jews. I think Harvard will be okay, though. I know when my parents cut my allowance off, it was a bit of an adjustment, and I was pretty upset. But when I remembered I had a $60 billion endowment hidden in the back of my closet, I knew it would all be okay. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Okay, hello everybody. I hope you're ready for a pretty good show this week. I had 3 topics, and I realized that 2 of the topics are kind of one topic. So instead of 3, we got 2 this week. So we're going to be talking about Harvard versus Trump, which ties into what is kind of topic number 2, Piers Morgan's appearance on Bill Maher. And then topic number 3, we've got the stabbing of a Texas high schooler. But first, my favorite comment from last week. Carrie said, quote, "Your cat wants to be your co-host," end quote. Carrie, you couldn't be more wrong. She doesn't want to co-host anything. She doesn't want to co-anything. She's selfish. She is an incredibly selfish cat. I don't blame her. It's not her fault. She doesn't share well. It's probably a problem of parenting on my part. I'm pretty indulgent with her. Look at her. This cat she misbehaves, all right? I can't help it. I don't know where I went wrong, but she doesn't want to co-host anything. She wants to show all to herself. It would just be her probably sitting next to the heater talking about food. That would probably be Winnie's ideal situation. Anyway, thanks for the comment. Let's talk about topic 1, which is going to be Harvard. Harvard's been in the news a lot in the last year, and it is not for their benefit. Harvard is, what would it be? Harvard is the most prestigious American academic institution. I think that's a very safe thing to say. I saw this study done one time that basically it was tracking what you would consider prestige positions around the world, or around the country. So what that means is the political class. So it was tracking senators, congressmen. It was tracking the history of the presidents and the Supreme Court justices. So all these high-ranking government officials. And basically it said that the only university that seemed to have a disproportionate amount of power was Harvard. Even things we think of as very nice universities like Stanford and Yale and all those other ones, the Ivy League schools don't even come close. Harvard, if you go to Harvard, there's a disproportionate chance that you could wind up in a place of prestige just because of the name recognition alone. And Harvard is running into the same problem that Disney has run into, which is that you have this prestigious institution and you can only tarnish it for so long before the name value begins to wear off a little bit. People don't really care as much about Harvard. They don't think of it in the same thing it used to be. Harvard. Oh, he's a Harvard man. He's a smart guy. It's not really like that anymore. And that has nothing to do with anything other than Harvard's own choices. So Harvard has been in the news. It's all been bad for them recently. And this week it got a lot worse because there is a fight over $2 billion. But actually, it could be a lot more than that. It could wind up being somewhere closer to $9 billion when it's all said and done. But Donald Trump basically has rescinded or put a stop on $2 billion in federal money and contracts through Harvard University. They're looking at the IRS could rescind some tax-exempt status that Harvard has. There's a little bit of precedent for that. The IRS has pulled funding from universities in the past for discrimination. They did one famously, a Christian university, this is decades ago, that they pulled for discriminatory practices. So the IRS has done this in the past where they pulled tax-exempt status from this. And the government's also looking into stopping granting visas to foreign students, which at Harvard is about 25% of their enrollment. So this would be just absolutely detrimental to the university. Why is all this stuff happening this week? What has happened? Well, the Trump administration has come in, and they have said that Harvard University has failed to uphold civil rights law because they have failed to protect Jewish students on campus. And this is, I think that there's a good case to be made for this. We're going to get into this a little bit more, but I want to play a clip here first before we do this, because I think that this clip sums up a lot of my feelings, and I thought Piers Morgan in this clip just absolutely nailed it. So this little edit was cut by the Rubin Report, and let's just show you this clip real quick, and we'll talk about it.
All right, what if I was a young student at Columbia, they're on a green card, British, come in, happy to be here, do all my paperwork, get to Columbia, and I start leading a group which is a bunch of white supremacists, and we start terrorizing black students in the way that they were terrorizing Jewish students. Well, hang on. In that circumstance, would we all be as comfortable with this, or is it the reality which was exposed by the mobs at Columbia, which is that for some reason, Jews get treated differently to anybody else when it comes to this kind of thing? Because if that had been, honestly, white supremacists treating black students like that, they would be out the country in 10 minutes. In 10 minutes. What about if he had said all this at his green card interview? Would he have got a green card? No. No. If he said, I support a prescribed terror group in the United States, you're not coming in on a green card. All Marco Rubio is doing, it seems to me, is taking it back to that scenario and saying, well, if you'd been honest then, and by the way, he was dishonest on his green card application about other stuff, which is another part of the equation, which might in itself disqualify him from staying in the country. But the idea that he would have said, I support Hamas, I support a global intifada, I support the destruction of Western civilization, now give me a green card to come and live in America.
All right, I'll end it there.
Yeah, you're absolutely.
So, yes, absolutely, Piers Morgan nails it. And there is a double standard here. But Harvard has failed. They have failed to protect Jewish students on campus. It's the same thing we saw in Columbia and in the Tentifada all across the country there, where college campuses failed to protect Jewish students. And when he flips it around, and this is a game, it's almost a completely useless game to play at this point. Because in the last 8 years or so, somewhere around there, we've had this game where I've always said, when you're talking about racism, if you flip the races and it sounds racist, it's racist. So when people talk about white people and they make comments, and then you say, well, if I flipped it around and I made that same comment about black people, would it be racist? And if the answer is yes, then it's racist. The idea, the definition of racism to include power dynamics is done strictly to push a political narrative. Racism is bigotry based on race. That's what it is. And so right now, when he flips it around, when Piers Morgan flips it around, and he's talking about Jews, and he's talking about racism against Jewish people, because remember, Judaism is a religion, but there is also an ethnic component to Judaism that other religions don't have, where you can actually ethnically be Jewish, meaning that your people come from Judea. So it's actually a thing. And so you can be racist against Jewish people. And what Piers Morgan is doing here, when he flips it around and says, if we were having this conversation about white supremacists who were attacking black students, who were saying negative things about black students, it wouldn't be a conversation. And all these liberals who are defending this guy who, I can't remember his name off the top of my head, the guy from Colombia, for example, who's being deported. If they're defending him, they wouldn't do the same thing. This is not a First Amendment thing, because they're acting like they're protecting someone's right to free speech. That's not. No one would be out there defending them if they were white supremacists. But because it's Jews who are being targeted, people are a lot more lenient about what they allow to happen, and Piers Morgan nails it. It's a useless thing, though. this thing because it never worked the other way. People will write you off. They'll say, yeah, but we're talking about this. We're not talking about racism against black people, which is terrible. We're talking about racism against Jews, and it's complicated. Or we're talking about racism against white people, which doesn't really exist because power dynamics or blah, 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 blah. So it's a useless endeavor, but it is very eye-opening to people with rational thought because it's true. If we were having a debate over white supremacists, we imported a bunch of white supremacists from Germany who were holding Nazi rallies in the campus, then we wouldn't be having this conversation, this national discourse. Somehow they would be tied to the right. They'd say, well, look at these right-wingers who are out here being racist. This is typical. Typical. Send them back to Germany. That's what the liberals would be saying. It wouldn't be a First Amendment issue. People wouldn't defend this. The ACLU wouldn't defend this. And they used to be an organization that would defend stuff like this, but then they wouldn't. They wouldn't because they say, well, white supremacy is too dangerous. We can't defend that. Despite the fact that they literally defended the Nazis in Skokie. So it doesn't matter, but I find it illuminating because, as you said, Piers Morgan is right. When you flip it, if you have issues with it, when you flip the races of people involved, then you realize you're not being truthful or you're not being honest, and you need to do some self-examination. You need to figure out why you support it one way and not the other way. And I think that that's useful for everyone in almost every circumstance to just flip it around. Should you exercise power in a certain way? Well, what if that power was being exercised against you in a certain way? Would you like it? And if the answer is no, then don't do that. Don't do that thing. Anyway, he's exactly right. Anyway, so basically, here's to pull back a little bit and actually talk about the story instead of getting into the weeds. The Trump administration sent a letter to, I think there was a number of universities. I know Columbia was one of them, and obviously Harvard because we're talking about it. And basically, for these different universities, it had a set of criteria that the Trump administration wanted the universities to comply with to get access to the federal grants and money that the government was supplying. So in Harvard's case, $2 billion. And it was things like, so for example, I had a couple categories here. It said reporting students to the federal government who are hostile to American values, ensuring each academic department is viewpoint diverse, hiring an external government-approved party to audit programs and departments that fuel anti-Semitic harassment, and then also doing a check on faculty staff for plagiarism. So things like that. A lot of it had to do with anti-Semitism, but some of it has to do with viewpoint diversity, which is a big thing. Like, for example, if you're the federal government, you're the Trump administration, and you have a set of values, a set of beliefs in the Western canon. You believe in Western civilization. You think it's good. Maybe if you're, and I'm not saying Donald Trump is like this, but let's imagine that you think this is a Christian nation and you have a set of values that go along with that. Why is it, if you're in charge of federal money, would you spend federal money to support things that undermine your beliefs as an administration? You were elected. You were elected by popular vote. You won the Electoral College in a landslide. The American people have voiced that they want you to speak for them. Why is it that we would then supply universities to undermine Western civilization? This guy who we're talking about from Columbia, Khalil something. What is his last name? I should have looked it up. Anyway, but this guy, who's the Columbia student we talked about, we did a little podcast on him a month or two ago. He has said that he wants to bring down Western civilization. Doesn't believe in Western civilization. He's very openly pro-Hamas, it seems like, or at least belongs to organizations that are openly pro-Hamas. Why should we give any money to any university, any institution that funds people who believe in bringing down Western democracies or Western civilization? I like Western civilization. I like where I live. I think it's important to maintain that and defend that. I think that that's what people should be doing. I think that there's the idea that the West rose on accident it didn't happen that way. It's not what happened. It wasn't an accident. The meeting of Jerusalem and Athens brought forth this philosophy and theology that allowed for human flourishing across the globe. You mix that with capitalism. You mix that with individual rights based on the writings of some brilliant people throughout the years. A guy like Thomas Jefferson understood human rights better than 99% of people who are alive today, right now, who take advantage of it. So we have this miracle of, I don't know what you would want to call it. If you want to call it fate, you can call it whatever you want. But we have this miracle of circumstances that allowed for the Western civilization as we know it to exist. And now we have people who want to undermine that because they think that their ideas are better. Now, we have practiced history that says that most ideas that people hold on the left are bad. Socialism and communism are bad. They have been tried. They result in death. This capitalism can go too far. You can develop into cronyism. You can develop into some sort of oligarch situation. There are a lot of ways that capitalism can go awry. But right now, we're not in that in the United States. You still have the ability to advance. The meritocracy still exists, and it's important because it is the way that you rise from the low class to the high class through your own hard work and skills. And so why would we give any money to people who want to undermine this way of living? Why should Harvard house students who want to come to America to destroy America? Why would we do this? Why would we give visas to people who want to do these things? It makes no sense to me. When Piers Morgan says on your green card application, if you were honest about your beliefs and you said, I do believe that whatever, the world should live under Sharia law, or that Western civilization should give way to communism, or that capitalism must be overthrown and we should lead the CEOs of companies out in handcuffs. If you said these things on an application to come into the United States, we wouldn't give you an application. We wouldn't give you a green card. We'd take it away. And so why should we allow people to stay in the country who believe these things, who obviously were not truthful on their applications? This guy wants to undermine Western civilization. Okay, fine. Do it from wherever the hell he was originally from. I can't remember. Because living in America is not a right. You're not given the right to live in America. America is a set of values and ideals and a history and a people. And there's no one who has a right to be here who wants to destroy those things. It's like, and a great analogy is just a house. I would never let a guest in my home who told me at the doorstep, well, I just want to break everything when I'm inside. Why would I let you in? I'm not going to let you in my house. You're out of your mind. And if you tried to get in my house and if you tried to break all my things, then we would have a fight. We'd be fighting. And so it's the same in the country. America is the home of 350 million people. And if you come in and you say, I want to break all your things, I don't want you to come in. I just want you to stay out. If you want to come in, you say, I love America because I love the idea that hard work can make me a living and hard work can help me advance and feed my children and I can leave a legacy. Come on in. You're welcome. Come in, please. Come in. If you want to work hard and contribute to the country and you're here because you want a better life for your family, I get that. Believe me, I do. I think we should make it easy for people to come here to work and pay taxes and become part of that American ideal. That is, I'm all for this. Excuse me. But you can't tell me that everybody is allowed to come to the United States, especially people who don't want to be here, who don't want to live in this society. They want their society to come here for whatever reason. They can't just stay home. So anyway, I think that Piers Morgan nailed it. I think that Harvard is in trouble here because Harvard has said they're not going to comply. Now, why? They allowed anti-Semitism to thrive on their campus, and now they're going to act like it's a First Amendment violation to bring them into accord with civil rights law. I don't know what they're thinking because I don't think they're going to win on this is a First Amendment violation. I don't think that's going to hold up in court. And I wonder what their goal is. They don't like the idea of being beholden to the Trump administration. Well, I have a simple solution to that. If you don't want to be beholden to the Trump administration, stop taking federal money because then you're not beholden to anyone except, I guess, your donors. But if you don't want the federal government to have a say in what you do, you got $53.2 billion in your endowment. Okay, use some of that money instead of taking the billions of dollars from taxpayers to fund things. By the way, I'm not opposed to federal money being used. I know a lot of times I advocate cuts. I advocate for smaller government. I like these kind of things in theory. The government has a role. That's why it exists. And the role of government is very simple. The role of government is to stop people from killing each other. That's kind of the role of the government. And then you say it can also do other things, but that's the primary role. Everywhere it gets into, it's not the government's role, for example, to be your healthcare. You don't want the government in charge of that. They do a poor job. You don't want them to be in charge of things other than really your personal safety, maybe some infrastructure, which would be nice. But I'm not opposed to the federal government attempting to do things. So, for example, a lot of the federal government right now is funding money through Harvard for research. I think research is a good thing. I think a lot of science is nonsense and garbage these days because what we're talking about is not actual science. We're talking about social science, and that's a different thing. But STEM science, research into medical technologies, for example, is good. And I'm not talking about studies that say, hey, look, the transgender brain actually behaves differently than the cis. I don't give a shit, okay? I'm talking about medical advancements that make a difference in people's lives. Like, hey, we developed a new drug, or hey, we've perfected this MRI protocol so that now it doesn't last 30 minutes. Now you go in there and it takes about 2 minutes, which is a real thing that's happened, and that's great. I am all for the government could fund some of these kind of things. It's great. But do they need $2 billion at Harvard to do that? No. I think that they probably have enough money in Harvard's endowment to do things. And I get there's reasons why you can't use an endowment for certain things, and sometimes the donors put stipulations on them, but that's not really my problem. I don't go to Harvard. It's not, you want to go to Harvard, then pay the money to go to Harvard, and Harvard you should be able to pay for yourself. You're the most prestigious institution in the United States. Why do you need taxpayer money? The same thing I'll say to NPR and PBS. Why do I need to pay you? You don't have any conservatives on staff. You don't like conservatives. Claudine Gay was an embarrassment to your institution. You've been anti-Semitic. You discriminate against Asians on your medical school applications. Why would I want to support Harvard? And then the people who graduate from there get to go have nice, prestigious jobs and make lots of money and be in positions of power. Why do I need to fund that? It's the same question I ask for everything. Why should I pay for it? It's not that I don't think things are good. Like, for example, you say, hey, this child gets cancer and their family is going bankrupt. Do you think it'd be nice to pay for it? Of course it would be nice. Yes, absolutely. A little kid has cancer. Should we fund it? Yes. The question I always ask myself about spending money, federal government spending money, would I take money from you? Would you take money from me to do it? That's the question. I think it'd be great. We should fund this little girl. I'd give money to some little kid with cancer, if someone popped up. Do I think I should be able to take my neighbor's money and give it to that little girl? That's the question I ask myself. And the answer is always, always no. I'm not going to steal someone's money. I don't get to tell other people how to spend their money. That's where I think people mistake the role of government. Because you say, well, the military or the police or the infrastructure, you make the same argument. Well, a street that everyone uses seems fair. No one's using that street and no one's making monetary gain off the street. No one's trying to, if you need a street, you need a street. The street makes sense. If you need a bridge, you need a bridge. Bridge makes sense. If I'm going to subsidize farms, does that make sense to me? Does it make sense that I take money from my neighbor and give it to the farmer? I don't know. Why does that make more sense than the street? The street to me makes sense. The bridge makes sense. Paying the police that everyone has access to and keeps everybody safe makes sense. Paying for the military, same deal. Keeps everybody safe. Everyone has access. Makes sense. But when you start getting into little projects, should I pay for Harvard's research into beans, whatever they're doing? Maybe. yeah, I'd probably like the benefit of more bean research, more MRI research, more research into drugs or hypertension, whatever they're doing over there. Yeah, okay, that makes sense to me. Would I take my neighbor's money? Would I force him to pay them so that I can get the benefit? No, I wouldn't do that, which means I wouldn't say the government should fund it. That's kind of my baseline for where this goes. You always ask yourself the question, would you be willing to take someone else's money? Would you take my money and make me pay for things I don't want to pay for? It's like the argument for abortion. Okay, you like abortion. All right, you want to pay for abortion? Whatever, that's fine. Should the federal government pay for abortion? No, because you shouldn't force people to pay for things that they don't want. And again, has unequal access. The road doesn't. The military doesn't. The police, they don't. A bridge, it doesn't. Things that you're taking money from one person to give to another person, those are unequal, and those are not fair, and those are really an issue where you break down social cohesion. So the federal government does not really have a role. It doesn't need to give $2 billion to Harvard. And Harvard shouldn't be discriminating against people, and they should fall in line. If you want, it's like I said in the beginning, they're going to learn the Disney treatment. Disney weighed in, it stepped into the realm of politics, and Ron DeSantis knocked their tax-exempt status, their special tax district, out of line. It cost them a whole bunch of money. The same could be said for Harvard. Don't weigh in on politics, Harvard, which you have. You've discriminated. You allowed anti-Semitism to flourish on your campus. There's not a free speech code that says you get to take over parts of campus and threaten students and make people feel unsafe. Okay? I'm all for. You know me. Anyone who watches the show knows me. I am all for free speech. But you do not get to make people feel unsafe in their own residence, the dorms. You can't make people afraid to walk around. That's not what free speech is about. Free speech is about being able to say your ideas. It's not about being able to shout and scream and force people to stay home and not go to class or be afraid to wear a yarmulke around because of the anti-Semitism that just is on the ground. Anyway, we're getting off into the weeds here a little bit, but it's a complicated issue about federal money, and I hope that the Trump administration wins this one, because I think it would be good for Harvard to have a reality check. It would be nice. And also maybe just stop the funds anyway. And Harvard doesn't need our money, and we shouldn't rob Peter to pay Paul. Anyway, okay. Let's go on to topic 2, murder at a football game. Now, I talked for quite a bit about topic 1. I know it was a little ranty there, but there's a lot of interconnected things here, because you're talking about Israel, you're talking about higher education, you're talking about free speech, you're talking about federal spending, all these topics that are really important to me. So it's easy to get off track. This one's going to seem small by comparison, because we're talking about a murder that took place at a football game in Texas. And there's people get murdered all the time. Why are we talking about this? I'm sure many people have heard about this specific case, and I'm going to just go over some of the details here real quick. So basically, there was a junior at Memorial High School in Frisco who was stabbed. His name was Austin Metcalf, and he was killed at a track meet 2 weeks ago on April 2nd. And he was stabbed by a 17-year-old named Carmelo Anthony, who was from a different school during the altercation. So here's kind of an overview. I'm just going to run through the logistics, like what happened according to whom, and then we're going to talk about why we're talking about this. So here's kind of what happened. Sounds like there was a tent that was put up at this track meet. So the track meet was a championship. It was actually between two schools. I don't think either of the kids went to either of the schools, but it was the district championship, I think, is what it was. So there was a tent that was put up by Memorial High School, which is where Austin Metcalf, the kid who died, where he went. And basically, in the tent, they said that and everything I'm saying is based on different witnesses. So I don't know exactly which witness said what, but I kind of put this all together to lay out the story. They said that there was a guy in the tent, and he was getting loud, and people were getting annoyed, and he was asked to leave because he was in the wrong tent. And this is the Carmelo we're talking about. So Carmelo's in this tent, and he's got I think a hoodie or sweatpants or something that said the name of a different school. So it wasn't Memorial High School. And they're like, hey, man, this isn't even your tent. Get out of here with that. And he basically said, Carmelo said, touch me and see what happens. He said, touch me and see what happens, and then reached in his bag and held his hand there. So he had a knife in the bag. He's holding on to the knife. He hasn't been touched. He's been said, hey, get out of this tent. This isn't your school. Get out of here. So then these kids approached him, and Austin pushes Carmelo to try and like get him out of the tent. And he pulls a knife out of his bag and immediately stabs Austin in the chest and then runs away. So, and Austin then died. He's got a twin brother. Apparently his twin brother was there. He died right there on the spot because he was stabbed in the heart. This Carmelo runs away. He gets flagged down by a research officer, takes him in custody. He says, oh, I did it. Yeah, I stabbed him. You think it could be self-defense, blah, 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 blah. So it's been a whole thing. Okay, so why are we talking about this? We are talking about this because this was a big story. But it would be a national story for the past 3 weeks if the races were reversed. It's kind of like what we were talking about in topic 1. If the races were reversed, we would have had countless think pieces about racism in America, how prevalent it is, how it's so bad that a young black kid could be stabbed at a track meet for being in the wrong place or wearing a hoodie. We'd hear all of these. Ta-Nehisi Coates would come out. He'd write a book about how black bodies aren't important and would talk about Carmelo Anthony was just a bright kid with a 4.0 GPA and blah, blah, blah. You'd see all of this. And it gets to be annoying when you see the pattern. And the pattern is this. Black guy kills white guy. No one cares. White guy kills black guy. It's a big deal. Same with the policing, by the way. So you know how we talk about we've talked a lot about police shootings. I've written a couple things about different police shootings. Well, all of the police shooting controversies that we've had have one thing in common, which tends to be a suspect who doesn't comply. Whether you're talking about Michael Brown, where you're talking about Eric Garner, where you're talking about George Floyd, doesn't matter. Any of these situations really could have been avoided with a suspect that just complied with the police. Because the police, when they say you're under arrest, you're under arrest. You don't get to say no. You don't get to fight, because every fight with the cop is life and death to the cop because the cop has a gun. If the cop loses the fight, you could kill him. So every one of these has the same kind of thing. And they all become national news stories, all these fringe cases. And there's not a lot of them, really. And I know people will think that 10,000 black people are killed by the police a year, but it's really not that many. It's like 200. And so in a country of 350 million people with hundreds of millions of police interactions a year, 200 black people are killed a year by the police. So, but every time you get one of these fringe cases, it becomes a national story. Now, the exact same cases they do happen. These fringe cases with a white person being detained either by white police officers or by black police officers who don't get any news coverage whatsoever because there's no narrative that the media loves to run with. And so because there's no narrative, they just fall away. Because fringe cases happen all over the place. But when it's black guy, white cop, it has this racial undertone that the media runs with. The same can be said with stories like this. Now, if a white teen had stabbed a black teen in Texas, we would hear all of those things I just talked about. It would just still be going on. It'd be 3 weeks later, and we would just hear it constantly. Every day they'd be talking about updates on the case and this and that. And you can see some updates on this because it has this thing where people have pointed out what I'm saying right now. But it's not the same. And it really is an indictment of the media and how nefarious they are as an actor, because they will push the racial narrative even when it doesn't fit, even when it's unwarranted, because it gets them clicks, and clicks gets them money, which is really the goal of the media these days. It's not to inform, it's to propagandize and make money. And people are really good at it, but that's not what the goal of the media should be, and it's despicable to me. So this Carmelo Anthony, or I keep wanting to say Carmelo Anthony. That is his name, right? I just had to look it up again because I was like, yeah, Carmelo Anthony. I had to be checked because isn't that the name of a basketball player? Isn't there a basketball player, Carmelo Anthony? And I just was like, wait, am I confusing him with the basketball player? No, it's his name, Carmelo Anthony. So Carmelo Anthony. Let's talk about escalation of force. You guys know, again, if you watch the show, I am not a pacifist. I am a practitioner of violence. I think that violence is very important, and I think men should know how to be violent. I don't think they should be violent. You shouldn't go out there and terrorize people. You shouldn't hurt people. But if you're a man, you should know how to fight. You should know how to defend yourself because it's the role of a man to protect people, himself included. So I do think that there is something to be said about that. So you're never going to hear me say, if someone attacks you and something happens to that guy who attacks you, oh, well, you should have been nicer to him. No, I'm not that guy. But I have to talk about escalation of force because escalation of force is incredibly important. This guy got pushed. Carmelo Anthony, he gets pushed. He immediately pulls a knife out of his bag, stabs someone in the heart, and kills him. Is this escalation of force warranted? No. Again, I'm not the guy. You're not going to ask me about self-defense and hear me ever say, well, you should have shot him one less time. No, I'm not that guy. But you don't get to just stab people just because. So let's use this as an example. I walk down the street, and I'm walking down the street. Someone bumps me in the shoulder. They kind of do it on purpose. They throw their shoulder into it. They bump me as they walk past. I turn around. I stab him in the neck. Am I justified? This guy he hit me. Make no mistake. He shouldered me, and he hit me. Do I have the right to turn around and stab that guy in the neck and kill him there in the street? No, I don't think I do. Because I think if you get a little bump, you get a little shoulder nudge, you get a little push even. Someone pushes you. Now, somebody who is in your personal space, ready to do you harm, you've already kind of made a mistake at that point. But that's not, so many people don't know that. Like if you're getting into confrontation, I'm going to give you some self-defense advice right now. If somebody approaches you and they're hostile, my number one thing is this, right here. You see this motion? I put my hand up like this. It looks defensive. Hands are up. One hand extended. This is what we call long guard in Muay Thai. So this is my number one go-to. You let them know. You establish space and let them know, for example, if you close in on this space, it's a problem. So you tell them, hey, stop right there. Don't get close to me. Stay away. Again, self-defense 101. Don't let people get close. Hey, keep your distance. Step number 2, if you are uncomfortable, someone's approaching you and they're hostile and you have the option, you should run away. That's how I would handle a fight. If I had the option to run away, I would run away. If someone pulled a knife on me, I'd outrun them. I'm pretty fast. So not everyone has that option. You have the option, you should run away. You should extricate yourself from the situation. But if somebody puts their hands on you, if somebody's walking past, if you've made the mistake, you let someone get close and they put their hands on you, they give you a little shove. Once again, your best option is to walk away. Not to stab them in the heart. Because again, if someone pushes you, they have demonstrated that they are willing to commit violence. And again, there's different kinds of pushing. Like if your back is to someone and someone's kind of like gently trying to move you to a certain place, that's different than someone shoving you in the chest. That's more of a strike when they hit you like that. But do you have the right, someone pushes you, to then immediately go stab them in the neck? No, I don't think so. Somebody who pushes you has empty hands, or at least one empty hand because they've shoved you. And this kid didn't have a weapon, so we're saying 2 empty hands. He pushed him. He said, get out of here. Push. You pull a knife out that you weren't showing before. You stab him in the heart. You kill him. No. There are so many. That is such a drastic escalation of force. It cannot be justified. Now, I am of the opinion you do not meet force with force. You meet force with escalating force. If someone pushes you, you have 2 options. You can extricate. Or let's not use push because push is easy to still extricate. Someone hits you. So someone has demonstrated that they're going to swing at you. They're going to throw a punch. Well, I'm not meeting a punch with a punch. That's not what I'm going to do. We're not playing that game. I'm going to meet a punch with either, well, it's going to sound bad because, again, violence sounds nasty. You're going to meet a punch with breaking someone's face on the concrete. You're going to meet that with pulling a gun and threatening them and telling them, hold up, call the police. You're not going to meet a punch with a punch. We're not having a fist fight if you're adults. Or somebody punches you, you might just pull the gun out and just hold it. You might just say, hey, nope, we're not doing this. Or if you had a knife, you could do the same thing. Pull a knife out, threaten them. Say, hey, get the hell away from me. Okay? Because that's what we're doing. We're escalating force. We're not meeting force with force. I'm not meeting a punch for a punch. You got to take it up a notch to shut it down. We're not playing a game of even Steven. Okay? You come with a bat, I'm pulling a knife. You come with a knife, I'm pulling a gun. Okay? You come with a gun, I'm going to pull 2 guns. it's like you can't just meet force with force. You have to meet force with an escalating force. But I can't jump from a push to a nuclear bomb. You push me in the shoulder, I detonate a pipe bomb that kills you and blows up the building you're in. Did I meet escalating force? Yeah, my force is escalating, but it's not proportional. It's not in the realm of possibility that is a justifiable thing to do. Same thing. Someone pushes you, and immediately, no words are exchanged, no anything happens. I pull a knife, I stab you in the heart. Now, you could say you were in fear for your life. Okay, maybe in the circumstances, certain ones would. You're in a dark alley, you're a woman, there's a man, he pushes you up against a wall. Well, that's different. You pull a knife, you stab him immediately. You go for it. And I'll put money in a pot to defend you because you'll say, I was in a dark alley and this man approached me and pushed me against the wall and I killed him and now the police want to charge me. That's different. That we're talking about a track meet in the middle of the day and a high school kid who pushes you. Are you in fear for your life? Do you think you're going to be murdered there in the stands at a track meet in the middle of the day at a high school by a high school kid in front of a bunch of people? No, you're not. You're not in fear for your life. There's no danger to you in that moment that you're going to be killed. So then to escalate, draw a knife and kill someone is murder. Yes, there's no justification in my mind. As a guy who I will defend people for defending themselves to the end of time. Okay, you're not going to hear me talk bad about self-defense. I am all for it. I think that you should have the absolute right. For example, someone kicks in this door over here to my condo. They kick it in right now. It's not a question to me what's going down. We're fighting to the death because you've just come into my home. You're trespassing. You've just demonstrated in disregard for the law, and you're breaking into a house for what? I don't know. Right? To die is what I think you're breaking in here for. If you break into this house, you're picking the wrong house. But my point is self-defense is warranted, but this is not the case. And if this was reversed, if the races of these people involved were reversed, we would be having a national conversation every day. And unfortunately, the way that most violence in this country works, it works like this. Make sure my terms are correct here when I'm using them. I think it's intra-racial violence is the most common, which means if you're white and you're murdered, you're most likely to be murdered by a white guy. If you're black and you're murdered, you are most likely to be murdered by a black guy. But when you compare, same with every ethnicity. If you're Asian, you're most likely to be murdered by another Asian. But where it gets tricky is that if you're white, the second most likely person to murder you will be black. If you're Asian, the second most likely person to murder you will be black. If you're Hispanic, the second most likely person to murder you will be black. So it's this weird thing where when you look at murder rates between races, it tends to be intra-racial, meaning that white kills white, black kills black. But white doesn't kill black at the same rate that black kills white. This is kind of the way those stats work. And yet when we have a national conversation every time a white person kills a black person, which is always bad, by the way. Murder is always wrong. It doesn't matter the races of people involved. You shouldn't be murdering people. I feel like that's an important one to say. I know it was only the 6th commandment, but I feel like maybe you shouldn't murder people. That's just kind of my personal thought. Anyway, the reason why we're bringing this up is because it grosses me out. The way that the media, the corporate press, pushes narratives, and you have to be aware of them, because you also can't go the other way. You can't go down this rabbit hole of the really far right-wing rabbit holes that make you, as a white person, resentful towards black people. Like, you don't want to be that guy. You don't want to be the guy who has racial animus in your heart for whoever, whether Asians or Jews or black people or white people. You don't want to be the person who holds that racial animus and lets it affect their thinking about giant groups of people. There are 13 million black people in this country. Do you think that Carmelo Anthony represents the majority of them? If you think the answer is yes, I feel like you need to challenge your own thinking. Because no, most black people aren't murderers or criminals or bad people. They're just people. They might be a little different than you, but they're just people. Most Jews, they don't sit around and conspire to rule the world in some international Jewish cabal. This is not a thing, people. All right, wake up. They're just people. Most white people don't hold racial animus in their heart. I know a lot of white people. I happen to be around them. I know them. I don't know a lot of racist people in my life. I really don't. And I've met a ton of white people. All right, most white people don't dislike black people or brown people or gay people. Like, they're just people. They just exist. And so don't fall down that path. It's easy to, because the corporate press is despicable, and it can lead you down a path of resentment, because if you know like I do, if you recognize the patterns, hey, it's a national news story one way, it's swept under the rug the other way. If you see that in all sorts of regards, it's easy to become one of those people. Don't become one of those people. Don't do that. Allow yourself to be better than that, and it will make your life better. Anyway, I know I realized I didn't have my timer up when we were doing this show. I've talked for a long time. Sorry about that. I went over time by like 5 minutes, so that's on me. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for the week. As always, I'm Tyler Chrestman. I hope you guys enjoyed the episode. Questions, comments, concerns down below, and I will catch you guys next Friday.